Pinkie Pie is William James, and Twilight Sparkle is W.K. Clifford. I intend to defend the former. Now let me be a little more specific. The episode Feeling Pinkie Keen has been reviled by many, including, for a time, myself, since it seems to suggest the abandonment of the scientific method and an embrace of nihilism. To our modern sensibilities this is abhorrent, and it is understandable why many think this way. Scientific empirical epistemology has allowed for so much that was once mystery to be understood, and therefore it is reasoned that science can and should explain everything. I agree with this view myself, but like James and Pinkie Pie, think it is not inconsistent to use belief as well as rationality when empirical investigation is not possible or conclusive. Thus, I will defend Pinkie in the episode's moral, using William James' arguments, which we will see are strikingly similar to Pinkie's own. Note that by belief I mean any belief whatsoever, which is to say, what we think is true, including gravity, love, and God, depending on your disposition. First though, let us refresh our memories of the episode.
It's my tail! It's my tail! It's a twitchin'! And you know what that means?
Actually, Pinkie, I haven't the slightest idea.
The twitchin' means my pinky sense is telling me that stuff's gonna start falling. You two better duck for cover.
Oh, Pinkie, it's not gonna rain. Why, there's barely even a cloud in the thing. I don't believe this.
You don't believe because you don't understand.
Okay, now when you get another twitch, we'll have all kinds of scientific information.
Okie dokie loki!
Any twitches yet?
Nope-y doopy!
Now? Anything?
Wait! Hold on! No.
Are you kidding me? After a whole day of non-stop twitching, now that I've got you all hooked up, you're not getting a single one?
I don't control it. They just come and go.
That makes no sense.
Sometimes you just have to believe in things, even when you can't figure them out.
I will not believe in anything I cannot explain.
Wait! Hold on. I'm feeling something.
Oh my gosh, what is it?
It's my tummy. That usually means I'm hungry. Let's eat.
You know what? Just forget it. I don't need to know if this is real or not. I don't need to understand it. I don't even care.
Pinkie is shown as able to predict things before they happen, due to twitches which she has learned to associate with the relevant events. So far so good. However, Twilight seeks to understand this phenomena. When she cannot, she gets increasingly less sane and more angry in her vain attempts to disprove this Pinkie sense. This is a significant change from seeking truth at the outset to seeking to avoid falsehood at the end, a distinction we will return to later. To begin with, we shall set out Twilight's views as they appear to be, using Clifford's arguments. A useful summary of their view is offered by Clifford himself in a famous quotation. It is wrong everywhere and for everyone to believe anything on insufficient evidence. No doubt many of you share this outlook, but why? Clifford's answer is as follows. If a belief has been accepted on insufficient evidence, even if it is a true belief, it is sinful because it is stolen in defiance of our duty to mankind. That duty is to guard ourselves from such beliefs as from pestilence which may shortly master our own body and spread to the rest of the town. In other words, falsity is above all to be avoided, and this is the single most important goal of the wise man. It is easy to see how this ties in with what Twilight is saying. Despite her friends believing in the Pinkie sense, and the possibility, I say possibility for that is all there is, that the Pinkie sense is in fact genuine, she refuses to acknowledge it at the risk of believing a false belief, since the evidence that does exist is not sufficient to prove it one way or the other. The problem with such a mindset, according to Pinkie Pie and William James, there is yet another sentence I never thought I'd hear myself say, but I digress, is that Twilight and Clifford have lost sight of the goal of intellectual pursuits. This is where we return to the distinction we previously discussed. James expressed the problem as follows. We must know the truth, and we must avoid error. These are our first and greatest commandments as would-be knowers. But they are not two ways of stating an identical commandment. They are two separable laws. When we believe the truth A, we escape the falsehood B. It hardly ever happens, however, that by merely disbelieving B, we necessarily believe A. We may, in escaping B, fall into believing other falsehoods, C or D, just as bad as B, or we may escape B by not believing anything at all, not even A. This is simply a logical point. Negating a theory does not put forth a positive theory of your own, and thus the negator is not necessarily further to the truth. So if Twilight proposes a theory that the Pinkie sense is not true, or refuses to make a decision until there is evidence, she has no way of telling if she is any closer to the truth. James continues that there is a choice about which of the two rules to focus on in intellectual studies. By choosing between them, we end up colouring differently our whole intellectual life. We may regard the chase for truth as paramount, and avoidance of error as secondary, or we may, on the other hand, treat avoidance of error as more imperative. Clifford exhorts the latter. Believe nothing, he tells us. Keep your mind in suspense forever, rather than by closing it on insufficient evidence, incur the awful risk of believing lies. You, on the other hand, may think the risk of being in error is a very small matter when compared with the blessings of real knowledge. Twilight, like Clifford, believes, therefore, that it is more important to not believe in false beliefs than to believe in true ones. James and Pinkie Pie instead suggest that it is worth risking the belief of lies for the chance that what you believe is true, in matters where there is insufficient evidence only. I cannot stress enough how much James emphasizes this. If there is enough evidence to conclusively prove one theory, then he always suggests bowing to that. However, when there is not, we can choose either to risk falsity for the truth, or risk the truth to protect us from falsity. He goes on to explain why he believes the former is the better decision, using the example of belief in religion. He says that when it comes down to judging between the possible truths in an area where by its nature evidence is not sufficient, everyone necessarily employs as much faith as each other. We cannot escape the issue of religious belief by remaining sceptical and waiting for more light, because although we do avoid error in that way, if religion be untrue, we lose the good, if it be true, just as certainly as if we positively chose to disbelieve. Skepticism, then, is not avoidance of option, it is option of a certain particular kind of risk. Better risk loss of truth than chance of error. In this way, each answer Twilight gives to the Pinkie sense issue, whether abstaining from judgment or choosing to not believe in it, is itself a belief. This is also the philosophical argument behind Pinkie's statement, sometimes you just have to believe things, even if you can't figure them out. Either way is a choice of belief, so belief is always necessary when there is not sufficient evidence. James clarifies this point as follows. The skeptical view of Twilight and Clifford boils down to telling us, when in the presence of the religious hypothesis and other issues lacking evidence, to yield to our fear of its being error is wiser than to yield to our hope of its being true. In other words, since the lack of evidence prevents conclusive choice of what is the true belief, we can choose either to bow to fear or hope, but either way it is our passions, not our intellect, which necessarily has to come to a conclusion, even though it may be impossible to verify if it is true. Thus, it is not the intellect against all passions, then, it is only intellect with one passion laying down its law. What proof is there that dupery through hope is so much worse than dupery through fear? This is the crux of the argument. In matters where evidence is insufficient, we nevertheless have to come up to some judgment about their truth, or lack thereof. Since reason requires evidence to come to a conclusion, we have to use faith instead, and run the risk of being deceived by either hopeful affirmation or pessimistic, fearful negation. Since both options are passions, not intellect, there is no evidence as to which is better or worse objectively, and we are free to choose to believe in them or not. For his part, he thinks that the value of truth outweighs the risk of falsity, especially since skepticism bars one from truth indefinitely, but acknowledges that others are free to choose their own answer. Thus James concludes the same thing that Twilight does at the end of the episode.
I give up.
Give what up, Twi?
The fight. I can't fight it anymore. I don't understand how, why, or what, but Pinkie's sense somehow makes sense. I don't see how it does, but it just does. Just because I don't understand doesn't mean it's not true. You mean you believe? Yep. I guess I do.
That was it! That's the doozy!
I am happy to report that I now realize there are wonderful things in this world you just can't explain. But that doesn't necessarily make them any less true. It just means you have to choose to believe in them. And sometimes it takes a friend to show you the way.
Honk.
Always your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle.
Now hear James' version, and spot the parallels, now backed up with the arguments we have discussed. If we are empiricists, if we believe no bell in us tolls to let us know for certain when truth is in our grasp, then it seems a piece of idle fantasticality to preach so solemnly our duty of waiting for the bell. Indeed, we may wait if we will, but if we do so as our peril as much as if we believed. In either case we act, taking life into our own hands. No one of us ought to issue vetoes to the other, nor should we bandy words of abuse. We ought, on the contrary, delicately and profoundly to respect one another's mental freedom. Then only shall we bring about the intellectual republic. Then only shall we have the spirit of inner tolerance without which all our outer tolerance is soulless, and which is the empiricist's glory. Then only shall we live and let live, in speculative as well as practical things. This, then, is perhaps how the immoral should have been presented. All the necessary things were there, but a little more depth was needed. At any rate, I believe James' final words here are a moral all of us can get behind, regardless of our views on the episode. Thank you for watching. What are your thoughts? Am I right to side with Pinkie and James, or does this episode still rub you the wrong way, meaning Clifford and Twilight's views make more sense? Let me know in the comments. Until next time then, this is Nightsphere the Gnostic. Goodbye.
Isn't it boring? Following a recipe. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Let's dance. Oh wait, surely you'll find your own